So welcome to the January version of Intersections, our math PLC. And really what this is, it kind of started out as almost a little bit more of like a webinar where you'd get like a professional development lesson, but that just didn't really feel natural. And since we've kind of turned it into more of just a conversation. So today we've got about 5 people on the line, but we're going to record this and we're going to post it to the hub so other people will be able to see it in the future. So pretty exciting stuff. I noticed that most of you have already logged in on this little table in the Google Doc. So please, once you've typed in your name, you can go ahead and scroll down there, and there's a sample math problem. So I'd like you guys to all, we're going to start the day by doing a math problem. All right. So anyways, welcome to Brooke Taylor. Brooke is our special guest host today, and we talked about what topic would be suitable for today's, I don't know if this is a podcast or a PLC or a show, whatever the heck you want to call it. But basically in the previous weeks, we've talked about standards-based grading and then also how to make grading homework easier. And so now we thought a great next natural step would be alternative forms of assessment. So both in homework and in summative assessment. So Brooke, hello. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell the crowd a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I teach at Billings Senior High, obviously in Billings, and I've been working on doing some standards-based grading a little bit, and also just kind of like Jake said, some alternative assessments in my classroom. And so, yeah, I've enjoyed it, and I think the students have too, so I like to learn new ways of teaching pretty much every year and see if I can better my teaching as I go. I don't know. What else should I say?
Cool. You're involved in just about everything. So you're doing your doctorate at MSU, you're on the stream design team, you're on the board of MCTM, presidential finalist for the Presidential Award in Math and Science Teaching. Got 2 kids, 3rd on the way.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I'm tired just talking about you.
It's fun though. It's all good things and good energy. So.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us. We got a small enough number of people that why don't we go ahead and introduce ourselves. So I'm just going to look at the order in the chat. So David, you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I teach at the University of Montana and work with future math teachers. Secondary math is my favorite, but now I get to prepare middle school math teachers too. And I'm teaching a Fenwick assessment class this spring, so I was hoping to pick up some pointers on this GoToMeeting this afternoon.
Cool. Well, excited to have you here. Krista, did you get your audio working? We'll see. Krista is still having some technical issues. Krista, or else Leah, or else there's another person that says waiting for name. You guys are free to chime in there whenever, but at the bottom of the list is Michelle. Michelle, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Michelle McCarthy. I work at the Office of Public Instruction as the Science Instructional Coordinator, and I had never attended one of the math PLCs, so I was curious and got stumped right away on the math question. But I also teach science methods at MSU Billings. So I'm going to learn things, so that's a good thing.
Cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and launch into this. And before Brooke starts being the fount of knowledge that she is, why don't we have everybody in the Google Doc, which if you're not at the Google Doc, you can access it by clicking on the link in the chat. No audio yet from Alicia, so let's just have everyone go ahead and type in. So why do you guys assess your students? So you see in the Google Doc there, it says your turn. Why do you assess your students? Please respond to that writing prompt. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and read through these. Michelle assesses her students for the purpose of my understanding their understanding. Okay, cool. So good. David said, my students want to learn as much as possible, so I want to help them accomplish that. Cool. I said, I assess my students to inform my instruction. If I don't know what they know, how do I know what to teach them? And Brooke said, I like to know where my students are in content understanding in order to know whether to expand their knowledge in the foundational concept or expand it further through extension. Assess for my instruction to see how new activities are working. Oh, I love that. Okay, so assess for my instruction to see how new activities are working, grading, and just daily/hourly to getting the student's frame of mind. So I really love that because I think of it as I need to know what the students know, but then also using it as a way to reflect on your own teaching is very, very powerful. So let's go ahead and move on our little agenda here, and Brooke is going to talk to us about some alternative ways that she assesses her students. Brooke, you want to take us away here?
Sure. So this kind of stemmed out of the idea that especially in a school like Senior, you have quite a few students in your classes, and depending on what subjects you teach, that could be anywhere up to 30 or around 30, and if that's 5 classes, that's 150 students, and so kind of the traditional format that I was used to as a student of turning in every day's homework and grading every single problem was not something that was efficient for me, nor would I be able to give them good feedback. It would be more of like something that I would have to put off some of it at least until later, and so for me it wasn't working like I wanted it to be working, and so early on in my teaching career then I started to try to think of alternatives so that I could still be figuring out what my students knew, but more in the moment, using things in class, and then also trying to find an efficient way to grade outside of class as well, where it wasn't every single problem of every single individual practice or homework assignment that they did.
Cool. Yeah. When I was teaching in Arizona, I had like over 200 students a day. I was teaching 6 classes, so it was pretty crazy. Michelle, you were teaching in a really smaller school, weren't you?
Yes, I taught in a 3-room schoolhouse.
Wow.
Well, that was my last position, and I had 5th through 8th grade in my classroom, and but that was a total of 7 students.
Cool. So let's reflect on whether this will work in the different settings as we move forward. What did you do, Brooke?
And so early on, one of the first things that I started doing was a homework quiz. So after we kind of got to a big content idea that we've been building up to, I would assess them through a homework quiz where I'd pick some of the important questions throughout each of their homeworks and have them turn those questions into me with their full work. So then I would be able to give them that feedback before there was any additional assessments from there, just to kind of see, are we getting it? Do we need to go back over some of the skills before building further? And so that was something that I started early on in my classes, and then the more, I guess, comfortable I got, the more I started doing groups in my classroom, and so and using problems that were more rich, I guess, where students are able to have a discussion, and it's not just x plus 2 equals 4, so what is x? It would be, some real-world problems that they're going to have to problem solve through, and they might come up with different ideas, kind of like the squirrel problem, I guess, in a way. So having those discussions, listening in, asking questions, actually just getting to talk with the students and seeing what they're understanding was something that I started and I continue to do in my classroom now. But as far as like individual work goes, I also started doing a piece of best evidence last year. So I was in an assessment course in grad school, and we were talking about standards-based grading, and we were talking about this idea actually of, is it really something that we want to do to grade every single homework assignment and every single question within that homework assignment? And so we started thinking about maybe there is a better way, so then we can give better feedback for students and not just marking their homework. And so what I came up with was, like I said, a piece of best evidence. And so for me, what I like to do when we get to, again, like a couple sections into what we're talking about or a couple days into the content when we've been building up to a big idea, after we've kind of solidified that a little bit, I have the students pick a piece of best evidence. So they get to decide what, for example, completing the square was one of them that we did for Algebra 2. So they had a few in-class tasks that we had done. They had some individual practice that they may have taken home. And so they got to choose from any of those things, and they have to tell me why it is their piece of best evidence, why they think it best demonstrates their mastery of the concept. And then they also have to rate themselves. And so the way that I do that is I have them initially rate themselves, and then we get to have a discussion if I disagree. So what I say is, for me, a 4 for them would be, I think I've mastered this so well that if my friends in my group have questions, I can explain it to them, and I feel confident that I'm telling them how to do it correctly. A 3 to me is like, I pretty much get it most of the time. I sometimes make a few mistakes, but I still feel pretty confident. And then a 2 would be, I can do this, but I'm not always right. I feel like I have the process down, but I might not always be right. And then a 1 would be, I can do it with help. So that's kind of what we talked about early on with a piece of best evidence.
Cool. I really like that. Looks like we got a question down there from Krista. Would love to see your way of tackling the piece of best evidence. What do the students fill out rubric that you're discussing? Do you have like a printed rubric or anything that we could send to the people that are here?
We could, I mean, eventually, but it's kind of more of, we just have that discussion about, I grade everything on a 4-point scale, and so we talked about that early on, so I can look back and see if I don't have a rubric right now. What we're moving into as a school is proficiency scales. And so having our power standard as a level 3 mastery, and then giving examples of what that looks like for a level 3 versus a level 4 versus a level 2. So we've been working on those as a school. So eventually I'll have, you know, more specific ones for specific content. But right now, just in my, I think it's my open disclosure and my parent letter, I just have an overall kind of what I just explained. So it's not necessarily a rubric, but kind of just those words typed out, so I totally can do that.
Cool. And Chris has got another question for you. Is this all one-on-one? And what do you retain for your records?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I didn't clarify. So what I have them turn in to me is a piece of paper, and they have all this written down on their paper. So they tell me on their paper, they write down why they picked that assignment, why it best describes their mastery of that content or their understanding of that content, and then they rate themselves and why. So for them now, we've done it enough that they understand that, and so they're just writing like a paragraph to me about it, and then I get to go through, and when I'm looking at them, I'll get to write a nice note to them about, I completely agree, I can see how you've mastered this content because blah, 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 especially when A was equal or not equal to 1 when you're completing the square, I could see that you understood that concept, you know, or something like that. So the only way I'll have a discussion is if when I hand it back, the student is not sure, like if they rated themselves a 4 and I thought maybe they were a 3 because there were a couple parts where they weren't completely correct every single time, then we could have a discussion about, well, I thought you might be a 3, you thought a 4, so what do you think? Do you want to work to get to a 4? And so we get to have that discussion if they want to.
Yeah, cool. And you said you do this about once a unit, or how often do you do this?
It depends on the unit, I guess. So with quadratics, there's a lot of big ideas. One of them was completing the square. Another one would be factoring. So like I said, it depends on the unit. So for us in Algebra 2, quadratics were kind of big. And so I'd probably have 2 at least in there for those kind of big ideas.
Cool. And so there's one more question that says, do they usually attach their work?
Yes. So like I said, it's a task that we've done in class with their work, or they could do like an individual homework kind of practice, so they would be turning in those problems with their work to me.
Cool.
With their explanation.
All right. So do we have any other questions on the piece of best evidence? It doesn't sound like it. Do you have any other alternative methods that you wanted to talk about today, Brooke, or is that your big one?
Sure. So the only other one that I would, I guess, talk about too is, other than kind of like how I restructured my classroom and picking rich tasks, and that in itself to me is alternative assessment, because I feel like I have a much better idea of where students are at the end of a lesson than I ever did before. I think things like, whatever you want to call them, bell ringers or warm-ups or exit tickets, I think those are things that you can definitely use. But for me, what I've been trying to work on more are like projects and letting students have more freedom in how they can show me what they know. So I do have a rubric that I used for our Thanksgiving Desmos project. We actually did kind of an Indian Ed for All lesson about Thanksgiving, and then I had them make a Desmos with some requirements involving linear and quadratic equations, and then they had to do kind of like a reflection how they were able to tie that into what we had learned. So that was kind of really open, other than they just had a rubric. And I got things from like turkeys to mashed potatoes to really intricate like ornaments on a Christmas tree that had parabola designs on them and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. And then another girl did something to represent Hanukkah. So it was pretty cool, because they were tying in ideas of what different holidays meant to them and how that's different in each culture. And so it was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that. That's awesome. Oh, here's another question for you. How do they mentally shift from a 4 is an A, 3 is a B, etc.? Do the kids really struggle with trying to admit that there are 2?
I don't think so. And I have even honors algebra 2, and I feel like they're actually really brutally honest.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I feel like rarely do I have to disagree with what they've rated themselves.
And I think that's just a lot probably about the culture of your class too, about, you know, being honest with yourself and then being willing to like have that growth mindset.
Yeah, and so the shift from a 4 as an A, it's easier for us because with the grading system that we have, as much as I would like to use a 4, 3, 2, 1 in my grade book, it doesn't work out because we have to have percentages. So I actually use letter grades. So I might give them a 4 on their paper, but what they would see in the grade book is an A.
Okay.
So I can A, B, C, and D. So for them, they understand that a 4 is an A. So we kind of talk about how like a 4 is an A in their GPA scale anyways. So at least for my students, it isn't too bad for them to understand that a 2 is a C, and I don't know if that's the other part of that question. And
so that's really interesting that you like have not had any problems with that, because I did like a 4, 3, 2, 1, and that was back at my old school. They wanted to do the Marzano levels of understanding, so I tried to do every homework assignment out of 4 points. And one like unforeseen consequence of doing that is some of the students that didn't understand like proportional reasoning, they quit doing their homework. And I'm like, hey, what's going on here? They're like, well, it's only worth 4 points. You know, I don't have to do that. It's only worth 4 points. And I was like, yeah, but homework is worth X percentage of your grade. If you do none of the homework, it doesn't matter if it's worth 4 or 4,000. You're going to have a 0 in the homework column. And it was a kind of a lesson learned for me that if I was going to use that 4-point schedule to like have that conversation with some of the kids that think they might be gaming the system, you know? Yeah.
So that's why I think it actually might be nice then that it's letter grades, because no kid likes to see an F if they didn't turn something in, I guess.
Oh, yeah, huh?
I think number 5 is kind of the number 5 question, how long or often can they resubmit to improve their own understanding? To me, I feel like I'm on the really flexible side of that. Like I fully believe that if students want to keep working hard on something, that I'll take it all the way up until the semester. That's me though, and I know that there's some teachers that absolutely have more of the deadlines, like, okay, you have until 6 weeks grading period to resubmit any work. So I'll let them keep working for the semester, but that's me.
And I think that's awesome that you do that. It's just a balance. How much time do you have? How much can you do? And then how much, like, do you think kids are taking advantage of this or taking advantage of you, or, whatever?
Yeah,
So.
and I feel like if kids are willing to put in the work, then they will, and then I'm willing to let them do that. I have Honors Algebra 2 classes, and I have pre-algebra classes. So I don't have Algebra 1 classes, but I do have freshmen that didn't pass pre-algebra in middle school that come to me and have pre-algebra. And they don't have as much initiative. It's more of me being like, all right, guys, so let's go back and spend some time and improve your understanding of this concept.
Cool. That's really great. So, Brooke, I think those are the two that we covered when we talked earlier. Did you have anything else you want to share, or should we open it up to other people in the conversation?
I think we should open it up for sure.
So, David, Michelle, Krista, I don't know if Leah is still on there or not. We haven't heard your voice yet. We're waiting for name 40006. Do you guys have any other methods besides just straight testing that you use to kind of figure out where your students are in the classroom?
Well, I'll add in that I too ask my students to tell me where they're at, and to give the evidence that that's where they are. I have the advantage of all of my students are teachers or going to be teachers, so they need to learn how to assess others as well as themselves. I think we start by assessing ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So the self-assessment, this idea of self-assessment is pretty powerful.
In fact, the best kids in school are the ones that learned that early on, and that's what allowed them to be the best. And so I think we actually should be teaching how to determine whether or not what you're doing meets your own expectations in preschool.
Yeah, I agree.
That's really cool. Thank you, David. Anybody else have anything to chime in there? There was one thing that I wanted to probably talk about, and that was just this whole idea of like project-based assessment. And so I kind of dabbled in this back when I was in the classroom, but the idea that there are many kids with test anxiety, and if you have a bad day on a test, you might earn a grade that doesn't really reflect what you know. And so allowing the kids to work on a project that allow them to kind of not only show what they know, but kind of extend what they've learned to kind of the next level. And so I guess the one time I did this wasn't super, but it was like a good first try. And it was like at the end of the semester, and so I had the kids do Geometry City. And so I had the kids, they had to write out a map, and they had to put a scale on the map, and they had to build like 3D shapes. So they had to build like a cube and a pyramid and stuff like that. And their grade was based on a rubric. So they had to have like a proper scale, and they had to have X number of 3D shapes, and they had to have, a hexagon for their like a merry-go-round that's in the middle of the town, or a fountain or something like that. And it was really kind of cool for me because there were kids that got that artistic outlet that normally maybe hadn't been the strongest students in my class, but they really excelled because it was something that they took more interest in. So that was kind of an eye-opener for me, that you could, pick up more students by allowing them to have a little bit of creativity in their own assessment. And then I had a colleague who did like mean, median, and mode, and instead of doing like your typical test of, well, give them 7 numbers and make them find mean, median, and mode, and then you can go through and quickly grade it. What she did was they had to do a project. And so they had to go and survey some people and they had to make a mean, median, and a mode based on the data, and they had to draw some conclusions based on the data, and it ended up being really powerful. So I'd like to throw out project-based assessment as kind of another option, and one that I don't think that I would call myself an expert on, but definitely someone who's a fan. Does anybody else know much about project-based assessment, especially Michelle coming from the science room? Do you know much about it?
Well, in science, I find it easy. I would struggle a little bit more with math unless I could link it directly to science. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know any project-based specifically for math, except I remember in middle school once I had the kids figure out what grade they would need to get to with baby algebra for them to bring their grade to a certain point.
Oh, sorry, I'm laughing. I was thinking of the kid that needs like a 200% on the final to get a C. Cool. Okay. Well, I guess unless somebody else has anything else on alternative assessments, we might move along in the agenda. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Okay, I'm going to add something to Krista's question because she was asking about Algebra 1 students, and like I said, I have pre-algebra.
Oh, yeah.
And so I have moved away more from their piece of best evidence, but I just remember at the beginning of the year when we were kind of building the culture of it, like we would do assignments and then I'd have them keep it in their folder instead of turning it in. And so at first they were like, wait, what? I just did all this work and you're not going to give me a grade for it? And I'm like, well, we're going to have you pick which one you think best shows your understanding. So we're going to expand on this a little bit more tomorrow, and then I'm going to give you some instructions where you're going to pick your best. And I actually think that students really enjoyed that, even in pre-algebra, probably not having that too much in their past, but getting like to have some pride in their work that they chose. And they kind of got the idea that we're doing it for their learning and for their understanding and not just for a grade. And I think some kids are still trying to get used to that, but I think for a lot of kids that really resonated. So that's a good reminder to myself that that's something that I need to continue to use with them as well.
Oh, cool. You know what, that just sparked a memory in my head too of one thing I did, and it was I had the kids, it was like at the end of the semester, and I might actually do this more if I were to go back, but maybe at the end of the unit, like almost like a science fair of what you've learned for that unit. So make a presentation that somebody could come in and look at and kind of understand what the unit's about. So I had kids drawing up unit circles and explaining how, you know, sine is the vertical distance from the horizontal axis, and cosine's the horizontal distance from the vertical axis. And they wrote up all this really cool stuff, and then again they kind of were able to put that artistic spin on it. So one kid made like a Pokeball as the unit circle, which was you know, pretty cool. Everybody thought that he was the cool dude that day, but definitely sparked some more interest than I maybe would have gotten in other ways of doing things. So just another idea. Okay, so the one thing that I did want to really touch on is that you must know how your students are doing so that you can teach them accordingly, and that's why we have assessment, right? So I think through No Child Left Behind and even continued on with Every Student Succeeds Act, it kind of is really easy to feel like the reason you test is because it's the law. But really, no, the reason we test is so that we can be better teachers. And so a test doesn't have to be a fill in the bubble multiple choice. It doesn't have to be anything. It can be a piece of best evidence, or it can be a presentation, or it can be like a project. So basically just thinking of creative ways to make your class more engaging, accessible for your students, while also informing you on how to best teach them. That's why we have assessment. So that was my soapbox right there. Does anybody have any other burning questions or comments that they want to ask the group? Maybe you're the only teacher in Fort Benton, you had a question about a student or a topic, or you're in Helena and none of your coworkers wanted to talk to you about something. So are these your suggestions for the new topic, or is this a question here, Krista? Okay, so that's for the new topic. So new topic, how to tie math to real world or interesting topics and how to engage the students to persevere. Okay, cool. what other topics would you guys want to hear about in future versions of this PLC? That's always kind of a hard topic because Krista is actually the first person to come up with a great suggestion for the next show. Usually people are just like, I got to think about it. So Krista, I'm going to move yours down to under the next topic, and my numbering's kind of weird there, but okay, cool.
While you're moving that, Jake, engaging students to persevere is essential, and if we doubled the number of people participating in this session, then maybe we should keep doubling engaging teachers.
Yeah, well, because last month it was only me and Brooke. so we're doing a lot better this time. So
if you double each time, what happens if somebody eats 2 each day? Sorry.
No, I was just started thinking about food and got distracted.